On the first day of Christmas, the Juliana was slowly returning to Earth. Letters from children from all over the world would soon be coming in, and in the belly of the Juliana laid endless amounts of raw materials from other planets across the universe. She'd been built by Santa's foster child, Raven, in order to make toy production easier and less brutal on planet Earth. And with colonization and space travel around the corner, the Juliana was ahead of its time. Santa and his helpers had now been to space for almost a year, and most of the kids were looking forward to join orphanages and foster families on Earth, where they could start their own future. They'd send out the kindest requests and tried to describe themselves as well as they could, but the answers were always negative. The kids couldn't reveal the location of the Juliana, and since deep space travel didn't officially exist on Earth, there was no way they could explain where they'd been or who actually took care of them. The crew consisted of toy makers and engineers, and they had all managed so far being by themselves. If someone had a bad day or needed to let off a bit of steam, they pretty much knew how to handle it. But Santa worried that if the connections to Earth didn't get better, the Juliana would simply stop functioning. They'd all had high hopes that by traveling into deep space, they'd one day meet some interesting beings, and that they could perhaps be part of other civilizations. But it just hadn't happened yet. Raven felt responsible too. As much as she'd wanted to help out Santa, she felt she'd really made a construction error. Raven wanted to make sure the kids would have a better chance of returning to Earth. They had a world down there waiting for them, whether they wanted to or not. On the second day of Christmas, Raven gathered some older members of the crew, and together they made a plan to visit the few orphanages where they thought the children might still have a chance. We'll show up as the bigger brothers and sisters we've already become, and we'll simply represent the children. The skepticism of the orphanages is understandable. They worry about problems down the line that they can't fix. We'll bring them down there with us, but not all the way to the orphanages, because I can't stand watching their disappointed faces, and we're not going to let them know that we're doing this. We'll call it Inspiration Tour. And so they went, in the only flying object they had that wouldn't cause too much attention, and managed to land it in different airports around the world. The kids went shopping and sightseeing, while Raven's team spread out and visited orphanages in locations around the world that each of them knew best. They did everything they could to leave the Juliana out of the story in the most elegant way possible, but the answers remained the same. Raven found a black feather because she ended up looking for her own parents, or at least for a moment being absorbed in old memories. She thought she was. Toby found a homemade toy, and he thought about what life would have been like for him if things had turned out differently. And Craig found an old piece of classical music. He'd been looking for it for a while. He later joined the kids in the airport and tried not to mention exactly how difficult it would be to come back here and stay for good. Rosie and Kat announced from the Juliana that the number of letters coming in were higher than expected. This month was going to be unusually busy. Raven found comfort in the fact that the kids had had a great day. On the third day of Christmas, Raven began optimizing the Juliana toy manufacturing system. The production could only be speeded up with the aids of robots, and even though Santa didn't like it, he didn't have much choice. She didn't know what to do with the black feather, so she gave it to Troy, and quickly went back to work. The only way she could improve conditions for everybody now was to stay put and make sure production would still be interesting and fun for everybody. Craig and Troy and many of the older helpers always seemed to find the time to prepare and enjoy the development process. But there was a tendency among the kids that they easily became obsessed with speed as a quality in itself, and they'd put on toy maker battles to see who could do a given job faster. They'd had competitions before to kill off some time while traveling through space. And every time Santa got to know about it, he always worried that the heart behind the craft would one day completely disappear. He was aware how the kids couldn't have gotten the idea from strangers, though. Also among the kids, there was a need for adult females who could tuck you in at night, bring you hot cocoa, and just be moms. The kids believed that they were making these highly advanced caretaker robots in secret, and Raven hoped they were, because Santa shouldn't get the feeling that he wasn't taking good enough care of everybody. On the 4th day of Christmas, Raven stumbled across a letter that read, "Dear Santa, have you seen our daughter?" She'd never seen anything like it before, and she knew that she was Santa's only foster child. So she gave it to Troy, and asked him to check whether it could have come from one of the kids aboard. She hoped that perhaps someone was joking. Troy took the letter to Craig, who then took Troy to see a whole pile of special letters, which came every year. "The ship makes toys," he said, "and food and decorations for charity. No matter how bad a child might need it, we can't, for example, bring people or animals back from the dead, or be in several places at once. There are limits." "What do you mean?" said Troy. "It means Raven still has a choice," he said. "She can choose not to have it scanned. And if so, she can stay with the assumption that it's just one of the kids from around here winding her up. If we scan this, she might not have that option. The tools we're using here are very, very precise." "How precise?" said Troy. "Are we going to do it?" asked Craig. "Yeah," said Troy. "Great," said Craig, and pushed a button. "The letter is from Paris. It was written 2 days ago by a left-handed woman. The paper is from Ukraine, and the ink is standard Stettler 5104. It was thrown in the mail at the North Pole yesterday and picked up by our own cargo plane shortly after." "Thank you," said Troy. Raven tried to stay busy throughout the day and asked if Troy wanted to come along so that they could play some music for the kids at Rudolph's. They hadn't done that in a while. He didn't tell her about the analysis from Craig, though, and she never asked. On the 5th day of Christmas, the Juliana was optimized and ready for a steady growing number of letters. Raven and Troy had managed to make use of older cancelled robot projects, like the household robot, that couldn't actually make toys but seemed to work fine with a few adjustments. The kids could finally look forward to a toy production with less tedious burdens and more play. Whenever things were rolling in the right direction, as they were now, Raven would start singing, and for a while Kalinka had been listening in secret. She finally decided to pick up guitar lessons, provided by her big metal guitar hero, Rosie Crash. Rosie knew how Kalinka saw her as a role model and did her best to make sure Kalinka learned the basics. Rosie Crash was special in the sense that she had managed to establish and maintain a professional relationship outside the spaceship for several years. She'd been discovered by a British record company, High Rising Records, who had no idea where she was, but kept using her recordings. And she'd established a long-time friendship with Chief Engineer Douglas Walker and his secretary, Miss Box, who never questioned the fact that the internet connection was sometimes a bit scratchy. Rosie had managed to come back year after year with instrumental guitar tracks that sounded like nothing else. The way she would frame the theme, the control she had over the sound. Craig played piano, and he rarely listened to metal, but he liked some of the more quiet pieces by Rosie. Troy and Toby worked in the same department as Rosie, and they knew about the louder stuff, because even though many of Santa's helpers aboard the Juliana played music, Rosie played the loudest and reminded you that in order to be good at something, you'd need to practice. Kalinka kept playing, and after a recent trip to Brazil, Toby had picked up drumming again. On the 6th day of Christmas, Craig was listening to his findings of classical music from Earth. Kalinka had heard him play, and she thought the chords sounded so beautiful. Rosie had told her to look for music in different genres, and how you should always be honest about the music that grabs you. If you practiced, it would open a new path for you. And whatever it was Craig was completely absorbed in, it sounded different. She asked him if she could borrow the notes. Sure, said Craig. Rosie stayed in contact with High Rising Records and decided to introduce her roommate, Kat. Kat had been traveling with the Juliana for the past year, and the two had done a few compositions that they wanted to share with Douglas, on guitar and bass. He still had no idea where the actual location were, but it was as if Kat had a similar approach to the music and time to practice. These were young people who, in the strangest way, seemed to have time. High Rising Record was at the time in a bit of a tight spot, and the old record company had seen better days. Douglas had trouble convincing both himself and his secretary that new adventures of artist development and band promotion would be a good idea. But there was something different about Rosie and Kat, who seemed to be either living on the moon or inside a barrel, or both as far as he was concerned. And Douglas found that after several years of searching for something new, he was slowly becoming curious again, and unsure, in a very positive way. Miss Bucks kindly asked him to not take too many chances, but the two had been together for a very long time, and she knew already what Douglas was going to do. On the 7th day of Christmas, Raven was singing again. She was trying to solve a technical problem and kept going over it while she was humming all sorts of tunes. Sometimes it would get louder and louder, and Kalinka would start listening. She knew that Rosie and Kat was playing a lot, and thought that maybe Raven could sing along with what they were playing. She had also found the courage to tell Raven, instead of just listening in secret. "Hey Raven, you've got a really good voice," she said. "Ha," said Raven, "it's nothing. I sing because I'm trying to solve a problem. Sometimes I do it to relax. It's really nothing special." "I think it's a great voice," said Kalinka. "Why don't you join Rosie and Kat?" Raven was a bit shy about it. It was all very new. But Kalinka, who now had so many good experiences, kept pushing. And Raven ended up working out a couple of songs together with Rosie on guitar and Kat on bass. They carefully started practicing as a trio, sharing whatever ideas they had. Craig had told Kalinka that singing and playing music together can sometimes make you feel as if you've known each other for a very long time. It's special that way. Douglas Walker was on fire when Rosie and Kat finally called him up and announced that they now had a third member. And even though the song still needed a lot of polishing, he could see how there was a chemistry. Raven got hold of Troy and asked him to fix a tambourine they were using. She didn't seem to be that busy, and Troy wondered why she hadn't fixed it herself. "We're going to Earth, and if you and the boys want to come along and play some music with us, you're welcome. We're going to see if we can open some new doors for the kids," said the girls. On the 8th day of Christmas, Raven's team was ready to leave for London. They were going to record their own music in the studio at High Rising Records, and, if possible, play a couple of concerts. Raven stayed in touch with the kids. It was a bit of a long shot leaving them and Santa alone on the Juliana, the constantly demanding toy production. It only seemed reasonable because more contacts on Earth was still very much needed. And since the invitation had come directly from the studio, They were going to give it a week, work hard, and see what happened. The kids were looking forward to spend some time on their own. They'd never tried being without the older helpers for more than a day. And they decided that it wouldn't hurt to throw on a little party. There were plenty of things you could do on the Juliana, and it didn't all have to be work. Some of them had worries though, knowing that the ship was now fully optimized. There was always a risk that you would activate caretaker robots, like the mom model, if you left too much junk around or stayed up too late, and that would put an end to the parties right away. You know, no one's ever really tested the mom robot, said Rosie, as soon as they'd arrived in the hotel in London. Yes, said Kat, it'll be okay. Raven optimized her, but the kids themselves decided what the robot should or should not be doing. Ah, yeah, said Rosie, that's true. At midnight, the amount of junk and noise about the Juliana registered so high that the mom robot unplugged itself. On the 9th day of Christmas, the kids got up well rested. They looked forward to manage the work process themselves and get real credit for their own achievements, instead of always being asked whether or not someone a bit older had been helping them out. Douglas Walker welcomed everybody in the sound studio, and Rosie was like a kid in a candy store. A lot of the sound equipment was rather old and worn out, but it had either been used or was made in golden eras of modern music that Rosie knew all about. Oh, this is an original RMX shuffler shifter. It's from the late 70s. This is wild stuff. We gotta use this, he said, and kindly asked Douglas permission to bring it back to life, since it had already been used and loved and wasn't exactly made yesterday. She ended up fixing it using a can opener that once found its way into the studio kitchen during the recording of a very famous band. Douglas was about to reveal the name and tell the story, but he decided not to. Aboard the Juliana, things weren't going too well. The mom robot, designed to be everything they longed for, was creepy and made it impossible to enjoy making the tours. She made you feel as if a bucket of ice water was being poured down your neck. Even though she did exactly what the kids had programmed her to, it just didn't work. They knew that over time it could pick up moves and learn gestures from the environment, and that if you spent a few minutes every day dancing right in front of it, it would gradually loosen up the moves. But none of the kids felt like dancing. On the 10th day of Christmas, toy production at the Juliana had stopped completely. The oldest kid around, named Melchick, made a quick call to Raven, trying to find a solution. The mom robot couldn't be reasoned with, and even though it was trying to optimize production, it was impossible for living things to get anything done. We've got a switch, said Raven, but it's very powerful. It melts down the central circuits in the robot, and there's no turning back once you use it. I'm gonna tell you where the switch is, and since you're the oldest one, I'll let you decide. You leave Santa out of this. All right, said Magic. Raven felt for a moment that she was letting everyone down. If the music didn't do anything for anyone, there was no reason to be standing on planet Earth when a helping hand was clearly needed elsewhere. But the music was progressing, and Raven decided to stay. Santa had told her a long time ago that she would have a life that included tough decisions, and this was apparently one of them. Melchick couldn't bring himself to use the switch on the mom robot. Neither could another boy named Puck, and much against their will they realized that if this was ever going to happen, it had to leave it to the girls. The girls managed to get much closer to the robot. But just like the boys, they kept wondering whether or not she was going to be the only mom they would ever have. On the 11th day of Christmas, Melchick and Puck was testing a fishing toy. Many toys made on the Juliana had loose parts, and this was one of them. If you really played and put your heart into it, you could accidentally make a component fly right through any regular-sized living room. And they discovered how any flying toy would simply direct the mom robot. She'd pick up the toy and make an effort to try to return it. The programming behind the action was originally made for picking up dropped teddy bears, and if you dropped 2 teddy bears before the first one could be returned, she'd prioritize and change direction. She was capable of identifying even the smallest toy at a very high speed, and this meant that if you had enough little flying teddy bears, you could steer her in a particular direction. "We are going to lure the mom robot into the dropship," said Melchick. "Use the emergency remote control and fly the dropship into space. Then we'll call Santa, and we'll call Raven, and they'll make the final decision together, whether to blow her into space or not. At least we're not going to have her around here anymore. If anything goes wrong, we've still got the switch. Let's go." The kids went looking for the mom robot in every corner of the Juliana. But it was as if she'd completely vanished. And apparently she'd forgotten her sweater as well. Funny, because that sweater was always part of the original design. On the 12th day of Christmas, Craig got a call from a very worried Melchick. Santa and the mom robot had now completely disappeared, and Melchick worried that she'd simply mistaken him for an alien, since the Juliana was full of raw materials from other planets. She was programmed to lock away an alien life form. Raven's team had now become a band, and they were about to go on stage that day, playing the first of 3 live concerts over 3 days. The people, the contacts, all led in the direction of a possible future for the kids of Juliana on Earth. "What do we have aboard the Juliana," he asked, "that is the strongest and fastest for rescue and defense?" "Well," said Raven, "if that's where we're at, it's a Black Angel. We've got one." "I thought that project was terminated," said Melchick. "Does Santa know about this?" "I hope not," said Raven. "Go and unfreeze the Black Angel. Tell her exactly what the problem is. And don't get in her way. I'm going on stage." "And Melchick," said Raven. "Yeah," said Melchick. "Fight." The band went on stage. Engineer Douglas Walker, who'd kept his finger crossed, decided to secretly show up. He'd promised not to, but since he'd been around the band all morning, feeling a strange secretive tension between the members, he thought he'd drop by. The band played well, but the sound was terrible, and in the kindest way possible, he managed to get behind the mixer and make a few adjustments. Melchick gathered all his strength and tried not to be afraid of the Black Angel. He also convinced her that what they all needed now was a helping hand. She wasn't scary in the way he imagined she'd be. She was very kind. On the 13th day of Christmas, the band was getting ready to play the second gig, and the word was getting around. More people were showing up, including a few of Douglas Walker's old contacts. They'd been skeptic for a while, but now thought that maybe he was onto something. "I could get used to this," said Kat. Aboard the Juliana, the kids were trying to communicate with the Black Angel. Suffering from memory loss, she tried to clean her teeth with the nearest object that smelled like peppermint. It didn't work very well, and she'd become slightly embarrassed. Two of the girls were trying to cheer her up. "Would you like to try some marzipan?" they asked. "This is from the kitchen. It's really good. And it's made in the shape of a pig, but it's not really a pig. And you can eat it any way you like." The Black Angel gave it a try. She understood the words, but she had trouble recognizing the objects. Pig, snowman. She recognized the smell, though. "Do you know what this is?" asked the kids. And they showed the Black Angel a small heart and explained in detail how it of course wasn't a real heart, that it was a symbol for something. Love. "Do you know love?" asked the girls. "Mm-hmm," said the Black Angel. The concert on Earth went well, and the band was about to leave the small venue when they were suddenly called back to do autographs. They didn't quite know what you were supposed to say to people, so they just smiled. On the 14th day of Christmas, the Black Angel had been gone all morning. The kids had been running around looking for her, and when they accidentally bumped into the mom robot, they managed to lure it into the disco at Rudolph's. The Black Angel was already waiting inside, and when the mom robot arrived, they both froze on the spot. Magic called up Raven and told her how the Black Angel had now caught the mom robot, and that the two had also accidentally caught each other. And he wasn't quite sure whether they were going to start dancing or kill each other. Raven was busy, and in the middle of a very complicated sound check. It was to be the last concert on Earth, at least for this round, and only a few instruments on stage were working. "Play some music," Magic yelled into the phone. "This could all go horribly wrong, but I've got an idea, and I need you to play some music, now." They gave it a shot. The Black Angel lowered the switch, and the two walked slowly to the bar. "What are we having?" asked the Black Angel. "Whatever you're having," said the robot. The kids weren't exactly sure what was going on, but the robot and the angel seemed to have involved themselves in some kind of peace treaty, and all the natural moves that they'd always hoped the mom robot would one day possess seemed to be there now. "What about Santa?" asked the Black Angel. "Oh, he's fine," said the robot. "He worries about Raven a lot. And you too. Always a little too spunky for your own good. I didn't want him to see you before I knew if you were all right. You want to dance?" The band went on stage, now knowing that things had quieted down at the Juliana, and played a concert that went pretty well. On the 15th day of Christmas, the older helpers returned from Earth. The kids noticed how there was something different about them, as if the world below had made them into a slightly different bunch of folks. They'd met a lot of people during the concerts, but none of them had had connections to orphanages, and there was a lot of work to be done still. Craig came up with the idea of building an orphanage from scratch. It was relatively easy to build it on the North Pole and have the kids move in, but he said they're going to have an everyday life so far away from other kids that they might as well stay on the Juliana. Going to school, finding new friends, having a classmate over wouldn't be easy. Raven asked Troy to give her the letter back, because it wasn't and had never been for her. She knew that very well. She just didn't know how the Black Angel would respond, and how her family would respond to a girl they once knew and the angel she'd later become. The Black Angel was now madly in love with the mom robot and ready to do anything to continue a life on Earth. She had very little memory of her parents, and she wasn't too good with names and numbers either. But she decided that Paris had to be the goal, and that the wings had to come off. On the 16th day of Christmas, Raven and the Black Angel met in the Juliana lab. The angel was looking very much forward to be doing regular things, like riding a scooter and going to a store without being treated like a great savior or a lab rat. "It's gonna hurt," said Raven. "But it's not supposed to hurt to a point where it drives you crazy. So don't try to be too courageous. You've got the letter from your parents, and Craig has been trying to pinpoint the location more precisely. At the moment, however, your plans of just moving to Paris is the best you can do." The kids had grown fond of the Black Angel and saw her as a great role model. She was fast and very strong, and seeing her without the wings just made no sense at all. It was her own decision, though. They understood that. 3 of the kids decided that they were going to Earth too, to play music and find an orphanage themselves. It obviously didn't work when you wrote honestly about your own qualities, or left it to the older helpers to do the research. They managed to establish an appointment by presenting themselves as individuals in a most horrible situation, with needs and challenges that far exceeded reality. The orphanage listened to their stories, and the kids were asked to show up immediately. On the 17th day of Christmas, production at Juliana had gone into a third and last phase. Containers as big as houses full of machinery were being moved around, and most of the toy production was now declared done and dusted. The Black Angel tried helping out in the cargo docks. She didn't show up with the intention of being around her lover as much as possible, but as the day progressed, she understood that that was all she was doing, and her presence had ended up causing more trouble than good. In the pods, however, you could work at your own speed, moving containers from A to B and listen to music. She had trouble reading the numbers, though, and every time she asked for advice on the radio, she felt how her being unsure would cause a strange discomfort around her. It was hard on others to see the great Black Angel being unsure of itself. Designed by Santa's foster child to always be strong and precise, she wasn't exactly living up to the rumors. When she finally got hold of a very large container and had absolutely no clue where to put it, she ended up hiding it close to the exit hatch of Santa's sleigh, because she hoped that he'd be more understanding and forgiving in case she'd now messed up so bad that the facility itself was in danger. On the 18th day of Christmas, the 3 kids arrived at the orphanage. Proud to have achieved finding a home for themselves, they forgot for a moment how their stories didn't exactly match their appearances. did everything they could to make sure they didn't look too healthy and strong. Toby and the band knew where the kids were. They now had several concerts coming up, and they decided to let the kids give it a try. They didn't know how the kids had gotten access so quickly. The Black Angel had found Toby's bicycle man laying around, and she'd been thinking about bicycling in the summer and how things would turn green. "Will you take me to Paris?" she asked him. "I can't," said Toby. "I'm too busy here." Toby was going to be playing with the band soon, and felt like the other band members that they ought to spend the little time they had helping out at the Juliana. "Maybe it would be a lot of fun," said the Black Angel, "if we went together." "I need your help, Toby. I can't read the timetables. I'm not good with numbers. I might already have made a terrible mess in the cargo docks. Please." "What are we doing in Paris?" asked Toby. "Well," said the Black Angel, "I'm hoping to find my parents. Santa got a letter from an adult. Could be my mother. I know she's crazy enough to do it. And I'm not sure where she lives. But Sally and I are moving there, so..." "Who's Sally?" asked Toby. "Oh, the mom robot. You like the name?" Toby ended up escorting the Black Angel to Earth, through the airport, and into Paris. On the 19th day of Christmas, the band was back on tour again. Miss Bucks, who was beginning to suspect that perhaps this band wasn't even located on Earth, had gotten a call from the 3 kids at the orphanage. They thought that Miss Bucks knew everything, and presented themselves as part of the Juliana crew. Now that Raven was on tour and so busy, they didn't want to take up too much of her time, and thought that maybe Miss Bucks could leave her a message. They went on trying to convince her how the orphanage was a very nice place. They'd been given some strange pills, because they'd tried to improve some of the toys in the orphanage. And the only entertainment they had now was Snowflake, who was unable to count her fingers. But other than that, they were fine, they said. The band was playing the first of 3 concerts in the North Atlantic. For kids whose parents mostly worked at sea, the local kids had been following the band and knew the songs well. Living in a remote location, the kids were used to visiting boats in the harbor and sometimes aeroplanes. And for the first time, the band would allow visitors into the plane. The airport, just outside of town, was built and sponsored by the locals, and the runway was just long enough for the 747 band plane to land and make a full turn. The families had brought food, and the mayor of the small town came over to say hi. Raven had no intention of leaving behind a bunch of good hands and potential space travelers who might actually function aboard the Juliana for a year. On the 20th day of Christmas, the Juliana crew got ready to receive a bunch of new members. There was at the time no established education plan for newcomers aboard the Juliana, and everything had to be fixed on the fly. Most of this year's production was done, but the wrapping continued and the last toy hadn't been made yet. The new kids came from a part of the world where sailing and working on fisher boats for up to a year was a natural part of youth culture. Miss Bucks, who'd now gotten involved, made sure all the families were informed and that the papers were in order. She kept Douglas Walker out of it, because after talking to the 3 kids at the orphanage, she'd gotten an idea and saw no reason for him to learn about it. Not yet. The three kids managed to escape from the orphanage and had to run as fast as they could to the nearest airport. Too proud to reveal that they now actually looked forward to be going back to the Juliana, they kept a very low profile and explained to Miss Bucks how they were now considering trying something else next time. On the 21st day of Christmas, Santa was getting his sleigh ready when he discovered a giant container blocking the way to the exit hatch. He had a couple of more days to go before delivery, and removing the container right now wasn't urgent. But there was always a chance that it might be missing somewhere else, and it was rather large. Only a few containers aboard the Juliana was that big. Santa could tell from the serial number that it had to have been packed the last minute before the Juliana made its first trip into space. And like many other things on the ship, Raven had organized most of the packing. Santa thought that it wouldn't hurt to take a look inside. The three kids from the orphanage had arrived, together with Miss Bucks, Douglas Walker, and the band, who'd now finished the last concert of the year and only had a couple of small promotion events left. Everyone except the Black Angel was now aboard the Juliana, and they all seemed to be getting along fine. Santa went around trying to figure out who'd packed his house. The three kids from the orphanage found it a great relief to discover Santa's house in the cargo docks. It was as if an old friend had come back to them. They managed to crawl inside and get some much-needed rest. There seemed to be no future for them on Earth, or at the Juliana, which was the same and yet so different now. The docks were cold, and so was the container. But Santa had left some of his old clothes inside, and they discovered how you could easily fit 3 people inside Santa's favorite fishing sweater. On the 22nd day of Christmas, a giant blizzard hit several countries in Northern Europe. People in the area stayed inside their houses, and the official message was that coming out now wouldn't be such a good idea. The band had to cancel their promotion events and had to wait at the Juliana. Some of the kids had been experimenting all morning in the disco, trying to create new sounds, and Douglas Walker had been listening, thinking about the future. Miss Bucks came by with some papers. "I was going to give you this later today," she said. "It's your present from me." "What's that?" said Douglas. "It's for you," said Miss Bucks. I bought a piece of land in Northern Europe. I was going to take you there today. You know, like a surprise. It's not much. It's a small hill in a town, and it's yours. On the condition that you build an orphanage there in the summer for the kids of Juliana, so that every time a new crew returns, they've got a place to stay. And then maybe we could run it together, you and I, when we grow too old for all this music business." Douglas was very moved by the present. "Come see the great house in the cargo docks and learn more about what the old world was like before the ice started melting and everybody had to leave," said the kids in the disco. They were joking on the microphone, announcing how Santa still couldn't figure out who'd packed his house, and that if you'd seen his slippers, you could also report to him immediately. In spite of their attitudes, most of the experienced kids at the Juliana ended up taking their dinner over to Santa's house that night. On the 23rd day of Christmas, Santa's house was gone, and most of the experienced kids were missing. They'd been using the parts to load the house onto the dropship, and was on their way to Earth with Santa's house, thinking that no matter what, that's where they would be living. Raven called upon all the older helpers and ran to the dropship as fast as she could. She managed to get inside, together with Craig and Toby and Rosie, before the kids would close the hatch. Miss Box called them up and yelled into the phone that if they were brave enough to fly the dropship straight into the blizzard, she had an idea about what could be done next. The kids lost control of the dropship, and Raven took over. Not able to see a thing, she double-checked with Miss Box to make sure that she knew what she was doing. The blizzard was as thick as rice pudding, and the only way to steer through it was by trusting in a set of simple coordinates. Miss Box said she knew the country, and that the location was close to water, but not very much more. She promised, though, that wherever it was, there'd be room for the house, and that supposedly people were nice there. "That's good," said Raven. "Let's also hope that they're nice after having seen our dropship." But it turned out that the visibility was so low and the wind so noisy that only a close neighbor would have noticed the dropship that couldn't land, because it was designed to do nothing more than break through the atmosphere. "Everybody get inside the house," Raven said to the kids. "Lock all doors and windows. We'll lower you down using the pods, and we'll come back using the 747. So, if the storm clears, be nice to your neighbors, and remember, you might have to live here." On the 24th day of Christmas, the storm had cleared, and the kids went around Santa's house, fixing all sorts of practical things. Having stayed at the Juliana, organizing plumbing and electricity wasn't that difficult. They quickly managed to fix it together. They opened the door and there was a bird singing outside. There also seemed to be a town with an old castle in it, a lake, and some old women wearing furry coats. Miss Box was all alone in London, thinking that she'd be visiting her sister in Leicester and get some more work done. She told Douglas how she'd already planned everything, but he insisted that after all these years, perhaps it was time that the two spent Christmas together. The older helpers returned from the airport with food and presents. They started cooking in Santa's old kitchen and talked about how Santa didn't need to come around right now, because he would of course be showing up later. Kalinka went out trying to find some raspberry jam. All the stores were closed, but she managed to find some at a gas station at the edge of town. When she met new people, she'd always say, "My name is Kalinka and I'm happy to be living in this town together with you." And sometimes people would then ask if she had a home to go to. "Yes, I do," she said. She knew that there would still be many new challenges, school and so many new people out there. But now, it didn't matter so much.
Time and again I go back, I'll be searching for your love in the hills, in the lakes, in the tides and mistakes, in the sweet summertime, when you tell me I should wait for your love. And me, I'm a piece of the sun, I'm an apple from your tree, and I'm still on the run. If you love me, I'll be good, I'll be here when you're gone, but you tell me I should wait for your love.
Choose life in the now, another sundown will never put you where you need to be. Just celebrate before it's too late, and then I'm sure you'll be breaking free.
Right through the bottom of the pit, in the ever-changing winds that you carry in your heart. You'll be strong and I'll be smart in the sweet summertime, when they tell me I should wait for the love. I'm just a piece of the sun, I'm the apple from the tree. No, I'm still on the run. I will love and I'll be good. I'll be here when they gone, 'cause they tell me I should wait for the love.
There's a star out tonight, and it's shining bright. And that's everything you need to be. Just celebrate.